When you bring up any flaws in Attack on Titan, you better expect to be hated, to be called media illiterate, stupid, dumb, or any slur that a fan can possibly fit into a comment without getting flagged. You'll be told you didn't watch the show or you didn't read the manga the moment you point out inconsistencies in the writing or its interpretations. So as I sit here and make this video, trust that I've taken that into account and I'm still going to proceed. Why? Because Death Note and many other shows, to be frank, simply have better written characters than Attack on Titan, especially when it comes to the hero-turned-villain archetype, or rather what I'd just call the true villain of the story. In this video, there will be major spoilers for both Death Note and Attack on Titan. And I mean it. Full story spoilers, including the endings of both. I will be discussing both the anime and manga versions. Yes, you heard me, anime and manga. If you haven't seen or read them yet, and you want to, this is your final warning before I dive into the plot analysis and summaries. We will start with Attack on Titan, not because Death Note is perfect. It's far from it. I have plenty of criticisms about its plot and execution, but with Attack on Titan, my issues go deeper. Let me get into that. In the beginning, Attack on Titan presents a straightforward premise. Humanity is on the brink of extinction, trapped behind massive walls to protect themselves from man-eating giants known as Titans. It's brutal, fast-paced, and simple. Human versus monsters. But as the story unfolds, those lines blur. The true threat isn't just the Titans. It's human nature, politics, war, and inherited hatred. What starts off as a survival story quickly spirals into a commentary on power, ideology, and the cost of freedom. That's fine in theory. Stories are allowed to evolve. But the execution? That's where things start to unravel. Let's focus more closely on Eren himself, because his descent into madness isn't portrayed like a true breakdown. It's sanitized, controlled, even poetic. We don't watch him break, we watch him transform. Yes, haha, he transforms into a Titan Shifter, but you know what I mean. Real madness, real moral decay, it's ugly, it's erratic, pitiful, frightening, but Eren remains composed. His most terrifying acts are done calmly, even passively. There's no raging spiral, no loss of self, just cold inevitability. He's not portrayed as unhinged, he's portrayed as decisive. In fact, we would more likely describe Eren as erratic in the first season of the show, rather than the last. I want to point out chapter 139 in the manga, and how it really drops the ball on the character development for Eren. Throughout the series, we see Eren as a young child several times. We learn that he yearns for freedom. I mean, personally, I would probably just say that he's obsessed with freedom, but whatever. We see that he has a strong sense of justice. I mean, he killed 3 people at 10 for someone he didn't even know. He wasn't remorseful for this act either. We have really good seeds planted for a character who could turn evil. This lack of remorse is the perfect setup. By the time we reach the final arcs, Eren is cold, detached, and terrifyingly resolute. He accepts that freedom comes with a cost, and he's willing to burn the world to obtain it. It's not that he wants to do these things, he just sees no other way. It's consistent, until chapter 139. In 139, we suddenly get an Eren who doesn't know why he did it. He goes from calculated to confused. From someone who sacrificed everything for freedom, to someone who says, I just want to be with everyone. I don't want to die. What? Because let's be real. If you're going to write a story where your protagonist commits genocide, you need to commit. You can't suddenly pull back the curtain and say, actually, he didn't really know what he was doing. Or, he just wanted to protect his friends. That's cowardly writing. It's the equivalent of pulling the trigger and then crying that the gun went off. And sure, Eren acknowledges the horror. I'm sure none of them wanted to die either. But then he immediately follows it with, but how could I ever be forgiven? You can't, Eren. And the story should know that. The author should know that. Why even write this line? Why write it in this manner? If you wanted Eren to acknowledge that what he has done is unforgivable, why frame it as a question? Because you want him to have sympathy. The story doesn't let that line sit. It follows it up by having Eren say, I don't know why I would have flattened the entire world. I just wanted to. I had to. Once again. What? We've had his justifications before, but suddenly now he doesn't know? How do you not know the justification you've had for your entire life? In all actuality, Eren does know. Surprisingly, I can interpret the media. Freedom was a primitive desire to Eren. That's why he seemed so obsessed with it. I mean, he was born hearing the words, "You are free." But this doesn't excuse the bad dialogue writing in this scene, though. No joke, Eren is giving most of my folk from the South when they say, "Freedom is my God-given right." But instead, he's a killer. And he also doesn't preach about our Second Amendment rights. Because he's already killed everyone that he wants to. This is the moment where everything is supposed to click. The entire story has been moving towards this moment, Eren's final confrontation. His motives laid bare. Not only does this chapter fail to deliver that clarity, it actively contradicts everything that the story's been building up to. It tries to reframe Eren not as a man who made a horrifying choice, but as a boy who never had one, a slave to fate, a victim of desire, a confused, scared kid who just had to. And in doing that, the story absolves him. Not explicitly, but quietly. Also, side note, something I've really wanted to point out for a while is the fact that Eren would be the controlling ex-boyfriend archetype. This is completely unrelated to the message I'm making, but it does prove that the pacing was incredibly rushed at the end. Eren had only shown familial or protective love for Mikasa, and suddenly he turns all,
"I don't want her to find someone else. I want to be her one and only love. Even if she does get over me, I think it should take her 10 years at least." Boy, if you don't...
"Buddy, you're embarrassing yourself. Stand up. I'm being serious. This is straight secondhand embarrassment behavior right here. People who fiend for this man after this scene are living proof of how desperate our society is. Because ain't no way you want a whiny-ass man who can't accept the fact that you're allowed to move on from someone who just killed many of your friends in the human population." Sadly, though, Mikasa is desperate enough. Shaking my head. Here's the core issue. Attack on Titan fails to portray Eren Yeager as a villain. Not just to label him as one, but to write him like one. Despite committing global genocide, despite murdering friends, civilians, and allies, Eren's framing in the final arcs is muddled at best, and sympathetic at worst. Now some might say, what do you mean? He's clearly the villain. We're supposed to dislike him, right? But no, that's not what the story wants from you. Eren is the protagonist. We've grown up with him. We're meant to root for him, relate to him, understand him. I never personally connected with him, but that's besides the point. The narrative clearly wants you to. It even wants you to sympathize with him. But there's still a deep split. There's no gray area. When we talk about sympathetic villains, we usually see the good before the fall. Yet somehow, there's still people who defend Eren's actions to this day. And while the same can be said about Light and Death Note, we see it to a far less degree. It's a lot more uncommon to support him in his actions, and I don't know why I still see so many people supporting Eren. I won't spoil other shows, but there are many where a hero becomes a villain. What makes those stories powerful is that the narrative acknowledges the fall. The writing condemns them, and Attack on Titan just doesn't. Eren's story leans heavily on this fatalistic logic. He had no choice. Either he kills 80% of humanity or his people are killed. Either he protects his friends or he doesn't. And here's where it gets frustrating. You can't have a character slaughter most of the world and then end your story with his friends planting flowers on his grave like he died a noble soldier. The story wants it both ways. Paint Eren as a tragic monster and a misunderstood savior. It just doesn't work. You can't have your cake and eat it. What Eren did is inexcusable. No matter who he was before or what he believed, at the end of the day he's a monster. Attack on Titan borrows heavily from real-world history. World War II imagery, fascism, ethnic cleansing, nationalism, it's all there. Hell, down to the German-inspired town and the armbands worn. You can't invoke that history and then fumble the moral message. Take a look at the actual figures who led the Axis powers. The man who led Germany had a traumatic childhood, was rejected from art school, and went on to commit some of the worst atrocities in human history. But no one says, "Oh, well, I understand why he did it." Why not, you ask? Because there is no understanding genocide. There is no moral gray area when the outcome is mass death. Same with the Italian dictator, same with the Japanese emperor. You don't see people justifying their actions because they had rough upbringings or believed they were protecting their people. Because we understand, as a society, that those justifications collapse under the weight of mass slaughter. But Attack on Titan is a fictional story, I hear you say. Yes, it is. Do you want me to argue against that? But fiction reflects values. It tells us what we're meant to feel, what we're meant to understand. And when your story asks us to sympathize with a character who commits genocide without fully condemning it, that's a problem, a serious one. If you'd like to hear more of my opinions about this topic, how Attack on Titan fails to properly borrow from real historical tragedies and the author's beliefs, I will completely be up to making another video. Just let me know in the comments if that's something you guys would like. This video just isn't about that, so let's get back to the topic at hand. I want to cover Death Note before I get into the endings of them both, and the real reason why you're watching this video, the comparison of the two. Death Note starts off strong. We meet Light Yagami, top of his class, brilliant, bored, and quietly disgusted with the world around him. In most cases, this would be any superhero movie where they become a vigilante, kind of like Spider-Man. But unlike Spider-Man, we know Light to be a little bit more narcissistic or manipulative. Even by the end of the first episode, we know this. So when he first picks up the Death Note, what's the first thing that he does? He kills a criminal. A guy holding hostages on live TV. Someone who, on the surface, deserved it. And here's the thing. We agree with him. In that moment, we think Light did the right thing. The writing of Death Note sets us up. It's like the trolley problem. We as humans would always sacrifice a murderous criminal over an innocent person, even if we had to pull the trigger, or perhaps pull the lever. Light has to use his pen to write the name. We as the audience would likely view his inaction here as morally wrong, rather than the action of him killing someone as the bad one. If you had the ability to stop a mass murder, why would you not take it? That's the trap. We view Light's actions as beneficial. He's benefiting the world. He's removing these harmful, evil people and saving innocence. He's giving us world peace. Well, at first he is. But the brilliance of Death Note is that it doesn't let you to sit in that comfort for long. What starts off as very evil criminals becomes perpetrators of petty crimes. And once Light runs out of petty criminals, he begins killing people for simply getting in his way. FBI agents, investigators, even innocent people manipulated into helping him. I mean, dude would have killed his own sister just to protect his identity. His goal isn't justice anymore. It's control. It's power. It's godhood. And here's the thing. You feel it happening. You watch the shift. You notice the moral line get crossed. And you realize, I was rooting for him. I agreed. And now I just don't. That's the perfection of it. Death Note doesn't just tell you that Light is a villain. It shows you how someone becomes one. And it shows you how easy it is for us, the audience, to follow along if the reasoning sounds justifiable enough. And like most people who watch Death Note, I can also admit the second half, not my favorite. I'm definitely not the biggest fan. Once L dies, the pacing shifts. The new antagonists don't carry the same weight, and the tension doesn't feel as tight. But even then, the message stays clear. The narrative never forgets what it's doing with Light. It keeps pushing him deeper into delusion, into manipulation, into cruelty. And honestly, I personally think that's why so many people dislike the second half. It's not just the pacing or the new antagonists. It's that they can't help but hate to see the person they were rooting for become someone they despise. You watch the person you enjoyed, who you thought was morally correct, become this pathetic man. Nothing more than an egomaniac in a human body. You are becoming uncomfortable with the true reality. You, the person behind the screen watching, or the person flipping the pages, are wrong. You were at fault. You believed in this man. You would have been a follower. You would have supported him. If he was real, you would have provided him with social power. So yes, you're uncomfortable with the second half of Death Note, because the man you thought you knew, well, he was never anyone else. This was always who he was. And when Light finally loses, when he's bleeding, cornered, exposed, it feels right. Not because we hate him, but because the narrative held him accountable. It followed his descent all the way to the bottom, and it made him sit in the consequences of every choice that he made. In the anime, Light dies after running away from the warehouse, sitting on the stairs next to the dock. He looks off into the sunset as he dies from the heart attack Ryuk gives him. In the credits, we see L's spirit standing over him. The manga has a slightly different ending compared to that of the anime. In the manga, Light does not escape the warehouse. Ryuk didn't want to help him anymore. He was alone. Not literally, but figuratively. Light begs for Ryuk to help him, to save him, but all Ryuk does is write his name in the death note. Light dies from a heart attack, in a pool of blood, sobbing, begging, like a pathetic man. He dies in fear.
Michael! Don't leave me here! Michael! Michael! Help me!
At the end of the day, the man who once claimed himself to be God died. A fate unavoidable by all humans, but one that could have been postponed by different actions. After all, he was just a human, a very feeble one. There's no glory in his death. There's no honor in the way that he's remembered. No one plants flowers on his grave. And while the anime portrays him as regretful in his final moments, it knows Light could never be forgiven. He's the real villain of this narrative. Now compare that to Attack on Titan. Eren wipes out most of humanity. His actions are catastrophic, on par with the worst atrocities in history. But instead of letting him fall the way Light does, the story bends over backwards to soften the blow. Attack on Titan is afraid to portray Eren as a pathetic, feeble human being. Sure, he's a Titan shifter, but the real evil lies in the human inside him. The story is too afraid to show its big, powerful man and cool protagonist as the miserable soul that he truly is. It seems scared of alienating its largely male audience by painting its male lead as despicable. This fear to fully depict Eren as weak or outright villainous creates a moral dissonance, because the narrative can't decide whether it wants you to hate him or forgive him. It ends up asking you to do both, to sympathize with a genocidal figure while glossing over the immense scale of his atrocities. We don't see Light get a grave. We see him die in pain and in fear. He doesn't die with the people he loved, and, well, to be fair, he only loved himself. But still, it's not like the love of his life is the one who kills him. But that's what happens with Eren. He dies in Mikasa's arms after she cuts off his head. His death is tragic, intimate, emotional, and somehow it's supposed to feel earned. Like this quiet, almost romantic ending can outweigh everything he's done. The genocide, the destruction. It wants you to grieve him. But why? Why do we grieve Eren and not Light? Because the story lets us. It tries to soften him. It gives him people who still love him even after everything. It gives him a final resting place. It gives him peace. And that's the difference. Even in real life, the men who've committed atrocities like Eren's don't get soft deaths. Some have no graves at all. Others were torn apart by the people they oppressed, their bodies mutilated, condemned in history. They died as pathetic men. Because that's what they were. They were never gods. In chapter 139, we see all of Eren's friends, at least the ones that are still alive, sobbing over his death. Sobbing over his action to sacrifice himself to return the other Titans back into normal humans. We see them grieving him. Mikasa, in tears, says, "I doubt they'd give him a proper burial." And then personally lays him to rest under that one tree he used to nap under as a child. She gives him peace. She gives him a grave he would have liked. I want you to think about that. A man who committed mass genocide gets a peaceful resting place. Gets a "he was misunderstood" send-off. We don't see the victims. We don't get the faces in the rubble, other than when Eren is actively killing them. We don't sit with the consequences. I want you to imagine an entire chapter dedicated to the victims after Eren dies. One where we see families crying over the dead bodies of people that Eren killed. To see these people cursing his name and screaming, begging for their family or friend to come back. Do you think that would change people's opinions on Eren? To see the gravity of his actions? Instead, we get to see all the dead people who were very popular characters and close to Eren. Inherently, the story shifts its focus entirely onto Eren's pain, his sacrifice, his freedom, and his friends. And then, he comes back as a bird. Are you kidding me? He got his freedom? No shot, right? The bird, the one that unravels Mikasa's scarf, the one that flies freely in the skies. It's not subtle. That's Eren. That's his final form. He got what he wanted all along. Freedom. Meanwhile, the millions of innocents he crushed under his giant wall titans, the children, the families, the entire cultures wiped off the map, no freedom for them. No graves, no closure, nope. We only get closure for Eren in the depiction of another war. Just Eren, flying free. And yeah, you can argue, well, actually, he's not literally the bird. But come on, the symbolism is shoved in your face. You can't tell others they lack media literacy if you can't accept this plot point. It is the same bird motif that's been with him since the beginning. Eren is the bird. Eren is free. And that's the ending. He gets a tragic hero send-off. And I have to ask, Isayama, are you okay? Because giving that character that ending isn't just tone deaf. It is narratively irresponsible. It is more than just bad writing. It's a disgrace to the innocent victims we lost in every war to date. It's sick and disgusting. But again, that's just a whole nother video. There's a very common phrase. History is written by the victors. This statement shows that the good guys may not always be the winners. That's the point. The victors are typically not great people, but they won. If Eren had succeeded, he could have been portrayed as a hero. Statues might have been built in his name, children might have learned his story in classrooms as the savior of parody, and maybe that's the scariest part, how easily a monster becomes a martyr when enough people agree with him. But he didn't succeed, and yet the story still mourns him. Because Mikasa survived, she got to write history. She made Eren a savior. Okay, maybe not her alone, but she definitely played a role since she gave him his burial. Sure, war starts again, but that's just realistic writing. It doesn't make the show any less supportive of Eren. There will always be another war. This is just basic history. You learn this in every class. But even in death, Eren is treated like some god, some war hero. Light doesn't get that. Death Note denies him that mercy. He dies crawling, gasping, bloody, and alone. Because that's all he ever really was. He was not a god. He was not a war hero. He was not a savior. He was just a boy drunk on power, and he was brought down by his own ego. Light dies a man stripped of everything. Eren dies with lips pressed to his own. You can make a sympathetic villain and still properly send them off. Death Note proves that. It gives Light a slow, pathetic, humiliating end. Not because the story hates him, but because it respects what he became. It doesn't flinch. It says, this is the price of playing God. Attack on Titan flinches. It gives Eren tears, forgiveness, a grave under a tree, because it's afraid to let him fall all the way. And maybe that's the difference between a story that challenges you and a story that comforts you. One shows you the monster and says, this is what power does. Look at what you've supported. The other shows you a monster and whispers, but he meant well. Anyways, that's all I have to say for my first video ever uploaded. I have a lot more controversial anime opinions if you'd ever like to tune in for my future deep dives. Hopefully you enjoyed, hopefully you learned something new, and maybe even I changed your opinions on some things, but thank you for watching.